Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a LEED Fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast, where I get to interview someone once a week, somewhere in the world, about their green building career. And today I have Ray Segars with us. He's actually in Atlanta. That's where I'm based. And Ray's got a fascinating journey through all things energy and renewables and green buildings, and now even some association work. So, Ray, how are you doing today?
Great, Charlie. Thanks for the privilege to join you.
Man, we've known each other in industry for a while and just excited about even some education work we're going to do together. But let's talk about you today. So take us back. Take our podcast listeners back. Where did you grow up and go to school?
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm here in Atlanta. I'm one of the unusual people that's a lifer here. I was born in the city of Atlanta, educated here, and then spent my career. And I'm here by choice because in some of my work, I've been all over the U.S. and the world, and we have lots of opportunities for energy and sustainability here, and we're leading some worldwide opportunities. But anyway, being born here, educated, I went to college at Georgia Tech, graduate school at Georgia State, and so a lot of local technical education. And early part of my career, I worked with the local utility, Georgia Power Company and Southern Company, which at the time, very interestingly, in the early 80s when I started my professional career in earnest, there was still a lot of energy conservation concern following the oil embargo of the 70s. And we were doing some interesting things there. There were some programs that supported us doing energy audits of all the public schools in the state. And we also had gotten some money to experiment with some unique solar projects. One was an industrial project down South Atlanta where they used parabolic mirrors to heat a fluid to do thermal solar. We had solar thermal on our building. And then one of the jobs that I worked weekends was a house in Roswell, Georgia called Future One. And interestingly enough, it had PV, passive solar. It was way ahead of its time, but it was a great experiment. And we learned a lot on the residential side, even for the 1980s. So quite a bit of founding in energy and sustainability, even that early on.
No, very early. And one thing I want to demystify real quick. Some people will be like, Ray, why does a power company want you to save energy, right? So let's demystify that. Can you help? You were at Southern Company and Georgia Power for 10 years. Companies like that don't want to have to build billion-dollar power plants, right? So just can we, there's some incentives and rebates, and it's let's maintain the grid. So could you demystify that real quick? Why does a power company say, hey, let's incentivize you to be a little more efficient?
I think that's a great question, Charlie. There's a couple of reasons. One, and this dates back to the day when I worked for the utility, power companies, they actually have two challenges. One is delivering the energy, the kilowatt hours, or if you're a gas company, it's the therms, it's the units of energy. But the other challenge they have is peak times. They have to build the plant, the wires, and so forth to manage the largest load that they have out there. And that can be a real challenge, especially if that occurs quickly and does not occur for long periods of time. One of the places that it's manifests, and we won't get off on this, but there's a concept in the solar business called the Duct Curve. And with the Duct Curve, the shape of energy demand doesn't necessarily match what solar generates. And so utilities have to go send signals to their customers to help them manage load. And so between that, and then the other is utilities, like the rest of us, have become concerned about the environment and climate and carbon. And traditionally, a lot of power was generated by carbon. And so they're looking at new ways to provide that packet of energy, the kilowatt hour, the peak demand, that doesn't require releasing a carbon emission. And so they're very engaged. And that's why You see an important role of things like nuclear and PV and wind power and hydro and the transitional things like combined cycle power plants, but also looking at things like battery storage. Is there a way we could store a lot of energy when it's generated, not used it, and shift that to when the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing? So it's a complex business.
Sure. Well, what a great answer. Thank you. Because I think sometimes that's just a mystery. And thank you for clearing that up. To those listening, I'm also here in Atlanta. We share an alma mater in Georgia Tech, Ray, and then also Georgia State. Way to go. That's where my wife and my middle brother also graduated. So we have some really awesome colleges all through the state of Georgia. And I'm glad that, you're from here. So let's talk a little more about that sustainability aha. So, okay, you get into the energy sector, you're doing these energy audits. And so how did your kind of sustainability career start to evolve?
Well, it's real interesting is in thinking back, actually, my connectivity with sustainability actually started very, very early. And it's kind of a convergence of not just sustainability, but my interest in buildings in particular, because that's where, as we know from EIA and DOE, 40% of the energy is used in buildings. But just a quick anecdote, as a kid, I went to my mom one day and said, "Hey, Mom, I need money to do this." She goes, "Well, you go figure out how to make it." And I go, "Well, gee, I don't know. I'm a kid." She goes, "Well, my family lived on sort of a semi-rural road." And she goes, "The grocery stores will pay you if you'll pick up returnable glass bottles." And I go, "Okay." And so I went up and started collecting bottles, returned them. And so at that time, it started ingraining into me how there is a circular economy out there. And of course, that's with materials and recycling, but also my mom grew up, her family is very much in agriculture. My grandparents had a 100-acre farm in Western Carolina. And I learned a great deal of how to be resourceful and not waste resources from my granddad. He was an incredible guy. He grew row crops. He had livestock, but he also learned to make use of everything he could have on the farm. And so my sustainability journey kind of started very early on and learning how to manage resources and make the best use of them. Fast forward, as I'd shared, what really planted the seed in earnest was when I went to Georgia Power. And at that time, before energy became cheap and plentiful again, we actually referred to ourselves as energy services. And one of the things I did early on in my career was lots and lots of energy audits of small commercial businesses. And it's amazing the things you find and how you can help folks make wise use of energy. I mean, we would do simple things like discover where there were problems with water heaters, or sometimes there were loads connected to their building they didn't realize were there, and help them learn to manage that. And also, of course, at that time, there was a lot of discussion on how to make things like HVAC and lighting more efficient, and advising folks on how to put in more efficient lighting and HVAC systems of businesses.
Wow. I love that storytelling there. Thank you for that. As you kind of look back, did you have any mentors, anyone you looked up to? Maybe someone opened the door for you along the way?
For the most part, actually, it was, I'd say in aggregate, two things. One, my parents, they had a very strong work ethic. My mom, having come from an agrarian background, they worked very hard on the farm. My dad actually came from a construction background. My granddad was a rock mason that built buildings that's still around in North Georgia. And so they gave me a huge inspiration on if you invest your time in learning and working very hard, it will pay in results. But fast forward, I really can't put my finger on one individual, but I was very fortunate at Georgia Power to work with some very experienced and smart engineers. And that was, to me, collectively, a lot of guys that had a lot of experience with energy delivery and also energy consumption, and just learning how the system works. And I was very privileged to work with a lot of guys. One gentleman in particular, towards the end of my time there, my responsibility, I worked in national accounts. I worked with a lot of folks that had multi-locations, things like fast food restaurants, grocery stores, hotels, things like that. And I had a manager there that was our manager of national accounts. And he was a great mentor in teaching me kind of how to stay focused on the important stuff. Sometimes working in a technical business, you can get really deep and lost in the details. And he had a great big picture perspective. In addition to working at the power company, he had a career in the military. He understood leadership and also how to work in complex organizations. And so his name was John Hood. And I often look back of some great things I learned from John when I worked there.
Fantastic. The hard work there with your parents and then some really good mentors along the way. So building on that, kind of looking back just for a little bit more, then we'll get the present day and we'll go forward is what are some of your proudest achievements, Ray?
Well, several. One of the things through my work in energy and energy efficiency, I earned a few awards. Earned them from Edison Electric Institute, Southeastern Electric Exchange, and then also got one from the DOE through Energy Star, got an honorable mention on a project that we did once. And so it's great to get that kind of recognition. Some of the things that I did at the utility working, one in particular, I worked on a project on a very, very large 12 megawatt distribution and manufacturing center for one of our customers. It's a project that took 3 years to pull together, but we had a lot of very interesting components to it: special metering, power delivery, how to integrate our services with manufacturing and supply chain at the same time. And it involved pulling a team of folks together. It was really exciting to bring a skill set together for many folks and deliver a great package to a customer. And so that was one of the great accomplishments. The other was after I left the utility, I was an independent consultant for roughly about 20 years. And so a lot of work for individual clients. One of the things I was really, really pleased with is I started consulting about the time the energy industry deregulated. And that was a real confusing time for a lot of folks. It's like, okay, I could make a choice. Gee, this is kind of scary stuff. And so I helped a lot of folks learn how to do energy purchasing, guide them into how to make those decisions. And then eventually, I think one of the best skills is transitioning to the market. After that came the recession and helping folks with efficiency and getting into where we are now, more sustainably minded. And so I think one of the things I think I'm most pleased with is being able to be flexible with how the market's changed with energy and sustainability.
Thanks. And thanks for connecting those dots. I know, a lot of consulting work, you even got into some on the kind of software and SaaS side. And then let's get to present day. So, Ray, tell us a little bit about your role at AEE, the Association of Energy Engineers, and what's keeping you busy today.
Yeah, Charlie, excited to share this. I've been on board as a staff member here at AEE for about a year, but actually been involved with the organization for more than about a dozen years ago. I knew about AEE. We're founded in 1977. It's a professional organization for energy engineers, a very strong focus in efficiency and sustainability and all things energy from supply and consumption sides. And we're an Atlanta-based organization, but we're international. We have 18,000 members and 28,000 certified professionals. And so a great network, not so different than your involvement with the lead organization, USGBC, how we specialty train engineers on energy and the opportunities there. Fast forwarding, what's my work? My role here is business development. This is something we've kind of added on recently. And what we've seen is with the current administration in Washington and other places, there's a much, much stronger emphasis on climate, carbon reduction, sustainability, energy conservation, and renewable energy. And we wanted to take what we offer and make it available to help folks be better prepared for this brave new world. Specifically, in November, the Infrastructure Act was passed here in the U.S. A lot of funding out there, energy related, things like EV infrastructure, renewable energy, wind and solar. One of the aspects that was discovered is the market is deficient of energy auditors. And that's an area where we train and certified professionals. And so we're scaling up to train energy auditors very soon so that when the funds are deployed to do things like energy efficiency projects. One of the big ones is going to be the residential aspect of the weatherization assistance program, is prepare individuals to go identify opportunities. And what we're really excited on the residential side is there's a strong equity component there, because a lot of these programs are going to be intended for folks that in the past have been most distressed by energy. And they're finding a lot of places that folks that have the highest energy burdens are the ones that had the biggest challenge to do something about it. And so when these funds become available, not only will we make ourselves more energy efficient, less carbon emitting, but we also help those in most need with these weatherization assistance programs. And so we're going to train people to go out, do those audits, and also do quality control inspections on the implementations there.
So important. I mean, I'm a big fan of education, training, credentials, certification. So, let's say someone listening does want to learn more about how to help buildings save energy. Can you remind us of your 2 or 3 key, credentials, these letters you can get after your name, just so everybody knows when they go to the AE site, which way should they lean? Is it C.E.M? Is it this? Can you just kind of sort those out for us?
Sure. But one of the things that's real exciting, and not to talk specifically, we offer 35 credentials, 25 are certifications, and about 10 more certificate specialty programs. And I'll talk about one that is kind of new and how we're directing to where the market's heading. Our signature offerings these days are the Certified Energy Manager, the C.E.M, and Certified Energy Auditor, CEA, and then Certified Measurement and Verification Professional. Those are very important. We need a lot of energy managers to direct organizations to understand your big picture on energy. The auditor is a little bit more field level, goes and helps identify opportunities. And then the M&V folks, a lot of projects need measurement. Do they perform? What's good? What's not good investment, energy and cost savings wise? Those guys evaluate that. And so that's how we get in there. But we have some other specialties. Like if you want to become a lighting expert or a water expert, we can offer certifications there. Now on the certificate side, what we're starting to discover is there's some specialties people are asking us for. And one of our new exciting ones is our transport energy audit certificate. It's instead of a week-long training and a long exam, it's a 2-day course. What we're starting to see, a lot of folks are getting more concerned about things like scope 3, not that energy you produce or emissions you produce or use on site, but things like your supply chain transportation or how your employees travel. Well, we're going to teach folks how to go audit your fleets. Maybe it's automobiles, trucks, planes, ships, trains, and look not only to assess the carbon there, but look for opportunities on how you get to a pathway to a lower carbon. How to, say you're in supply chain, what's your pathway to go to less emitting vehicles? And that's what this audit will do. And a lot of what we do is, regardless of the certification, is I think a very important first step is benchmarking your buildings or your process. And that's an element of all the things that we teach, is go identify where you are. And then once you benchmark, it's sort of like Drucker said, if I can measure it, I can manage it. And that's where a huge thing is, you can measure your energy consumption, your carbon emissions. You can have a good idea of where your opportunities to reduce and improve operations would be. And that's what a lot of our certifications and programs are about, is teaching professionals how to go identify the opportunities there.
Really impressed how innovative AEE is. So to our podcast listeners, we'll put some links in the podcast show notes. Check out what Ray's talking about here, and really fascinated by your role here with the partnerships and just what's next. And it's because this movement, this green building, energy efficiency, healthy building movement continues to evolve. So that segue to my next question, Ray. What is next? What are you reading up on, or what are you excited about?
Well, it's interesting. What I will tell you is next is what we're watching going on now, and then I talk to you about what I'm able to put my fingers on content out there. But what we're starting to see is a greater movement towards regulation, and not necessarily, you hear that word regulation, people kind of get their hackles up sometime. But a good example is we look to Europe right now. we're starting to see places in Europe where ESG and sustainability reporting is not just voluntary or maybe encouraged by a company, but the law. It's coming into law. And the first steps here in the U.S., where there's roughly about 40, or U.S. and Canada, 40 municipalities, states, or counties out there that will require some kind of assessment and reporting using tools like Energy Star Portfolio Manager to respond to benchmarking requirements. For example, here in our local city of Atlanta, there is a benchmarking requirement. If you have buildings a certain size, you must go profile your building in Energy Star and report it to the city. Where the exciting part of this we see is coming next steps here is places that are really on the cutting edge, like City of New York with Local Law 97. They are now going to the next step and taking this benchmark data and assigning carbon budgets to building. And by the years 2024 and 2030, there will be carbon assessments there. And so the big question is, okay, gee, that sounds kind of a challenge, but really it's actually, I think there's a carrot instead of a stick. If you see a carbon fine coming, maybe that might encourage you to make your building more efficient, put systems in, use renewable energy so that you can avoid these things. And so the exciting thing is, I think, is monetizing carbon. We're starting to see some models out there where we can monetize it. But other carrot programs would be things like PACE programs for various municipalities where folks that may not have funding to do projects can find financing to go implement projects that will perform. And so we're excited about that. A couple of other things, of course, renewables. What does renewables look like integrating with the grid? Battery storage is all the rage these days. Where is it incentivized? And how does it get modeled into the load shape? And of course, EVs, especially in the environment we're in with incredibly increasing fossil fuel prices, a huge incentive to go look at an EV. What is an EV going to do to the grid? And then looking beyond, could EVs be part of the storage solution? A big concept is something they call V2g, Vehicle to Grid. And they're starting to think about ideas of how your vehicle, which a big issue has been range anxiety. Will my car get me to work or get me home, or will it run out? What they're discovering, range anxiety is more of a psychological than a real issue. And a lot of vehicles have a lot of capacity that could help with the grid during stress periods. And so there's a lot of exciting developments where I think a lot of technologies and ideas could be solutions when we make this transition to the sustainable future.
You've got a good handle on it. I agree with all of that. So everyone, go ahead and rewind the podcast about 3 minutes. Listen to all that again, because that is a big part of the future, Ray. Thank you. Let's talk a little more about you and what's really helped you throughout your career and life, really. What would you say is your specialty or gift?
Well, that's I think one of the things is, while it's not been the best at times, I consider myself a lifelong learner. I've tried to be a sponge, and it's not just learning factual information, but, as I've shared, where we see the future is kind of have an eye and ear out to what's happening next. I think it's real important to see that, because if you have an idea for that, I think it makes you a little bit more comfortable with what change occurs there. One of the things that I enjoy, and it's something I've done on the personal level as professional, and what's really kind of worked well with me here at AEE. I've loved training young new professionals in the industry. It kind of goes back. One of the things that I used to do for fun, I was a scoutmaster in the Boy Scouts, and loved to see a lot of these young people come in the organization and go from not having a clue about how to do what they did to becoming very personally resilient and earning things like their Eagle Scout recognition and all the skills they learn. It pleases me no end to see that develop. And we're kind of the same way here in this organization. I love to see young professionals come in, have an eagerness to learn this stuff and become contributors to the solution. And I think that's real exciting. It's just kind of fun to me to see folks learn new stuff and put it to use.
Super exciting, man. Thank you for sharing all of that. So do you have any good habits, routines, rituals?
Boy, that's I sit back and look at it, and sometimes you see the regrets, the things where you didn't do. I think one of the rituals I have is, like I said, I like to be a life learner. I try to read all the material I can. I'm not a super fast reader, but my encouragement is read a book a month. You can learn a great deal with that. Doesn't have to be. Keep your eye on publications and see what's trending out there. Speaking of books, one that I want to share I'm reading right now is kind of interesting is, while it's not core to what we do, I'm reading a book called, and excuse the grim title, but I think it's a very encouraging read. They Tell Me This Is How the World Ends. And it's not as apocalyptic as it sounds. I don't know if you've heard of the book, Charlie.
Yeah, no, I'm going to check it out.
The author is Nicole Perloff. It's very recent, but it's actually kind of a history of cyber and technology and hacking and a concept they call 0 days. And what it's about, it's kind of a history of how technology's evolved and how we've learned. And one of the things, like I said, it's not direct, but it's very important. As we start moving more and more into things like smart cars and smart houses and smart grids and smart facilities, and in this current environment we're in, of course, there's been a great concern about things like cyber warfare, is all of this hinges on technology operating properly. And whether it's intentional or not, and a good example is what we experienced last year with the ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline. While that was part of the fossil fuel system, it had a huge crippling effect on energy and the way we operate. And this book does a great deal to bring one aware to how we've evolved where we are, all the players, and what to think about for the future as we look at it. Now, one of the things, and just real quickly, I want to share something I did during the pandemic, and I encourage folks to do this. With a lot of us kind of locked down at home or working from home, there was a little more bandwidth to do some other things that we choose. And I want to share real quickly about 3 books that I went through that I want to share with folks real quickly that could be important to sustainability. First, I went way back, read a book that I had to read in middle school, Silent Spring by Dr. Rachel Carson. A lot of people feel that's kind of the genesis book of the environmental and sustainability movement. If you haven't read it, go back and read it. If you have, go back and reread it. It's incredible. A lot of things she made us aware of, we're still tackling today. Second book I read was one titled Power Drive. I recommend this one. It's kind of a history of energy and fuel in the U.S. going back to Drake's oil well and things like that. But it talks about energy and how we've made the transition and how a lot of conflict that we had is energy related. And then most importantly, in the last one I went through was reading Paul Hawkins' book, Drawdown. I think everybody in the sustainability needs to read it. It's more of a reference book, but it's 80 solutions on how we're going to save the planet. A lot of great ideas. And what's really neat is for those of us that are kind of numbers wonky people, it also talks about what the cost and financial benefits and also what the carbon emission ton reductions could be implementing these measures. And what's amazing is a lot of people, when you think about it, you think about the sustainable things that we think about, like agriculture and vehicles and the grid. But it also talks about how we help people. Like one of the great ideas is women's empowerment. What they're discovering in countries where things are more equitable, women, emissions are lower because women are participating in the workforce, disease is less, family issues are less, and there's better environmental issues. And so Paul Hawkins' book shares a lot of really interesting stuff, and it's a must-do for everybody that's in sustainability.
Wow, you just gave us some great book reviews. So we're going to put all those links in the podcast show notes. So thank you. That was just what we needed here. Right. And, Ray, you and I know each other and we continue to grow our relationship. I don't know if you know, I'm a fan of the bucket list. So what are 1 or 2 things maybe on your bucket list?
Well, this may not be very sustainable. Travel's a big thing. I've traveled extensively in North America, but would love to, and have gone to Europe and seen some very interesting energy sustainability things. I did a trade mission tour to Germany once and saw a lot of exciting things they're doing there. But Australia and New Zealand have always been very appealing to me, very unique place. place in unique wildlife. I would love to visit Africa. And those are big bucket list items for me.
It's good stuff. Is there any career advice you wish you'd have known earlier?
Great question. And, my experience is, and again, I'm seeing this now, and I've been very fortunate, going back to the mentoring question, to coach some young people is, as I've said before, learn and be a sponge. But one of the things I encourage, the importance is certifications and credentials. It's very valuable, and it's amazing how much you can be of value, not just to the industry, but yourself, is go get trained. I'll give you a good example of one area you're involved with. What we're wrestling with is how do we push down and help folks not necessarily develop a preference, but an awareness and an interest in sustainability and energy at the college and K-12 level. I think one of the challenges is, as a kid, I was exposed to a lot of things and kind of became one of those people who wasn't sure where I was going to be when I grew up. And like these folks that, as a kid, they knew they were going to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. But it helped me learn a lot. But I work with some young folks, and I'll give you a good example, is Lead Green Associate certification. It's one of the few certifications you can go earn without a degree. If you're an undergrad and you're interested in sustainability, go get that. We at AEE are starting to noodle that idea. How do we take what content we have and make it available to undergraduates and K-12 STEM programs? And so if you're at that level, get involved. For kids, go join the robotics club, go and join the environment club at school. If you're at the university level, there's lots and lots of funded programs. A good example is the solar decathlon that is funded by NREL. There's a lot of colleges that will go out and put teams together and do designs. You really get some hands-on and learn. There's schools that have sustainable vehicle programs, and go roll up your sleeves and do more of that. I encourage that. I wish I'd have done more of that myself.
Solid advice. Solid. Well, Ray, my last question as we wrap up. It's been a fascinating conversation this morning. Let's say someone's listening to your story. They're listening to this podcast. They're just now jumping into this green building journey. What words of encouragement do you have for them? Number one,
the future is unbelievably bright. And there are some folks that are getting into our business I'd never dreamed of. One of the things that we're seeing, and what's amazing is your skill set you might think is far away. And I'll give you a good example. Say you're someone that's have a penchant for numbers and you want to head down the accounting path. Things like carbon assessments needs a lot of folks that have those skill sets in audit and carbon accounting out there. And so there's lots and lots of opportunities for folks that don't have the more technical backgrounds like engineering and building construction and things like that. But if they have backgrounds like accounting, environmental science, I'm blown away by what our friends that do meteorology and study climate and what the effects are and how that might affect. But one example is where we've just seen, besides the traditional businesses like engineering firms or energy firms or building firms hiring sustainability folks, the big four accounting firms are looking for a lot of folks. A lot of their clients said, hey, carbon and sustainability assessment looks very similar to accounting and audit. We need people to come and do that. And they're expanding their practices to do that kind of stuff. And so the bottom line is future's bright, lots of opportunities, but go out there, be a sponge, learn, don't be afraid. As Malcolm Gladwell said in his book, Outliers, jump in, get your 10,000 hours in, and it'll be amazing what you can do for yourself as a professional.
Hope everyone's been inspired by this podcast. I have, and Ray, we're right here in the same city in Atlanta, Georgia. So just thanks for spending time with us. Everybody connect with Ray on LinkedIn, and just want to say thanks. Ray Segars, Director of Business Development at the Association of Energy Engineers, right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Charlie. My privilege.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.